Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbeville. Before Al Rampmeier will talk about his year of military police service in Vietnam, he'll first talk about the men he served under. He speaks with pride of Generals Lynch and Hal Moore. We speak of pride of Al Rampmeier's brave and varied service to the Army and now to his community. Meet Lieutenant Al Rampmeier of the Brazos Valley. Al, first off, just thank you for your service in Vietnam and your service now. And we're going to talk about all those things, but let's go back to your hometown. You grew up in Palacios on the coast, and eventually you got to Sam Houston State. Sort of take us quickly from that time to when you went to college.
Well, I was in high school in Palacios
Right.
and played a lot of sports,
Yeah.
and graduated from there. Went to Sam Houston, and we graduated in 3.5 years at Sam Houston. Almost made it through in 3,
Right.
but had to go to ROTC summer camp in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in the summer of '64, and got to meet a lot of the Aggies and there, and a lot of other individuals. And that was 6 weeks of the hottest place I think I've ever been in, even hotter than Vietnam.
That was like July of '64, right?
It was July of '64.
That was pretty hot. You were a distinguished military grad, I know, and but you turned down your Army commission to take a reserve commission in military police. Sort of talk about that decision and why you went that way.
Well, my RA commission, my regular Army commission, was armor and finance, and I had decided that perhaps the military wasn't going to be my career. And I wanted to find out, a colonel over at the college said, well, you might want to try the military police. So they have a large, the number of men in that group are usually well-trained, and they're pretty smart, and they're to work with, but you have a lot of difficult situations. And so with that, I took my military police commission and graduated in January of '65.
And you actually entered the Army in March of 1965 in the military police. You went to Fort Gordon for basic and then to Fort Benning. And you were a second lieutenant, assistant operations officer. Sort of talk about your work before you went over to Vietnam and what your duties were.
Well, there our duties were varied, of course. We handled such things as all the traffic control on the post. We investigated all the accidents. I would become duty officer not only of Fort Benning, but also Columbus, Georgia, and Phoenix City, Alabama, which was sort of the nightlife over there. And many times we work with not only the FBI, but with the state and local police.
Right.
And so our jobs were varied. We went to helicopter crash scenes, car wrecks, investigated murders with our CI, our Criminal Investigative Department.
Right.
So it's pretty varied, even though I was only at main post Fort Benning for just a short time.
Right. This was around the time that people were first becoming aware of Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson was increasing the activity in Vietnam, and you were among some of the first groups to go to Vietnam. Sort of talk about that time, sort of how it came about, and you're going over to country. You went by boat, so sort of just take us through that time when you first went over to country.
Well, the 11th Air Assault was actually the predecessor of the 1st Air Cav Division. And when President Johnson said that he was committing an air mobile division to Vietnam,
Right.
then at that point he did not call up the reserves or the National Guard. At that point it became a tour of duty. And for the Army it was 12 months. Consequently, a lot of the individuals that were in the 11th Air Assault that moved over to the 1st Cav, those with 90 days or less did not make the trip. There were a number that had just over 190 days. And a lot of those, unfortunately, we lost
Right.
during the Ai Drang battle.
Right.
And but I have received orders on like the 15th of July of '65 to report the next day across the post to the 1st Air Cav, to the 545th MP Company.
Right.
And at that point, about 1/3 of the Cav had to be made up from individuals they pulled from all over the United States. And about 4 of the military police lieutenants all came from different posts: Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg, Fort Jackson, and I came, of course, from Fort Benning.
From Fort Benning.
So we only had 2 officers in the military police company that were really there when we showed up.
Right.
So, and we were all new. We had, at that point, we only had a month to get our people ready. They brought out the M16. It was tested, and everybody got qualified in that. At that point, we had 1 brigade that was airborne and 2 leg brigades for the airborne people, and everybody was packing up things in metal connexes to be shipped. Barely got to know most of the men in my unit. 11 of my men went in the advance party of 1,030, and the rest of them went on board ship with me. I had 5 days to get my wife home and to get settled and get back. And I left for, just as a movie, we were soldiers.
Right.
They picked us up on buses, took us to Charleston. I got on board the USNS William O. Darby, named after General Darby, and we left on the 16th, went past Cuba. We had a Nautilus submarine behind us. We knew that, and we could see the gunboats in Cuba. Went through the canal. Right there we saw 4 of our old Jeep carriers from World War II. They had our 450 helicopters on those.
Yeah.
Went through the canal, went up to Long Beach, California. Our little troop transport had about 2,200 men on it, pulled up beside the USS Enterprise. And we looked like a toy compared to that aircraft carrier. We were only in Long Beach for about 8 to 10 hours, and then we headed straight out to Quy Nhon, Vietnam, in the Central Highlands.
So in all, about how long a trip was this from when you left, went all the way around through the Panama Canal, back to California and over? How long were you on the Darby?
About 22 days.
About 22 days.
Yes.
And you went ashore at Vietnam. I think you told me they just dropped you off right there on the shore. You found yourself in waist-high grass or shoulder-high grass, and were told to go that way, and you would find the base. You're a young man. You know, 22 days earlier, you were in the safety of the United States. What do you remember your thoughts back then of what you'd gotten into, what was going to happen at that time?
Well, actually what happened is they had landing craft.
Right.
And they put us on these old landing craft. We landed. They did truck us to an airfield, and then we got on helicopters, and we helicoptered about 30, 40 miles into what was now our main base, which was called An-Khê, the home of the 1st Cav.
Right.
And the advance party of 1,000 people had hacked out what we called the golf course. They did not want to mess up the dirt. They wanted to keep the grass, so they chopped down shrub trees and stuff like that, and then that's what we started to. But they landed us in real tall grass, and then they said, there's Hong Kong Mountain. Walk towards that, you'll find the company.
Right.
And we were right at the base of the Hong Kong Mountain in what was called the division headquarters.
Right, right. You had to build the base, though, right?
Yeah, we had to build a base, and that base was built from the ground up. And when you think of a division of over 16,000 people with the support troops, it became massive over a period of time. But to let you know, yes, we were, needless to say, we were very nervous and scared.
Exactly, exactly. One of your first tours, I guess it was, when you went over there, involved the 101st Airborne. You were with them for about a week. Talk about what that was about.
The 101st Airborne sent a brigade over to Vietnam in July of '65, and they actually secured our area of operations. And so officers from the CAV went out, OJT, I went out with a military police unit, and it was called Operation Gibraltar. And the 101st Airborne had just stepped into a real bad situation. They lost a number of guys in a helicopter landing of a battalion, and they landed right in the middle of a North Vietnamese unit.
Right.
And during that time, we understood and started learning how to run convoys, bridge security, and of course the typical military police functions when you're dealing with enemy. We have prisoners and captured materials.
Right, right.
Working with the interrogation teams.
You're touching on that, and I want you to be a little bit more specific, if you will, about the jobs, the various jobs of the military police, because it is a unique position and a unique job in the military. It was a little bit of everything. No day was exactly the same for you, right?
Exactly. Being a division military police unit, and of course then we were broken down by a platoon, which is about 30 to 40 men, depending on what time of the year we were over there. We were assigned to a brigade, and I was assigned originally to the 2nd Brigade, which is commanded by Colonel Ray Lynch,
right.
From Madisonville, Texas, a graduate of Sam Houston, and who had been in World War II, Korea, and then now was commanding a brigade. And we originally were sent out with a battalion. We handled convoys 12 hours a day, 12 to 14 hours a day. Then we were also had a bridge to secure, and we were out there by ourselves. At that point, we only had about 16 men in our platoon that was out on the operation, and that was September or October time frame. But we also handled all of the typical military police duties in the division,
right.
Which included keeping the town, curfews, or keeping the men away from the city until, or from the town of Ankei.
Right.
And we had some unusual things happen, grenades going off in some of the bars, some of our guys being hurt, having to evacuate them and take care of them. And we also handled any other problems that would be typical of a police unit. Military police, we handled, as I said, the captured any enemy that was captured.
Right.
And we handled all the captured weapons. We worked with the interrogation teams. We also provided security for our brigade tactical operations center.
Right.
And at the same time, we also acted as an infantry unit in the brigade tactical area of operations, and we also provided security for anyone that came into our area that was higher ranked,
right,
like a general and above.
You mentioned Colonel Lynch, Colonel William R. Lynch, went by Ray Lynch. I know he was one of your commanders who meant an awful lot to you, and his wife, who's still alive and still lives in Madisonville now. Talk about Colonel Lynch and what kind of a leader he was.
Well, Colonel, and I refer to him as Colonel, although he did retire as a brigadier general. Colonel Ray Lynch was a unique individual. Was described as one of the best tacticians, along with Colonel Hal Moore.
Right.
And I went to many a briefing with Colonel Lynch, and his previous experience was so helpful to the unit during that time. And set in on his briefings was something that I'll never forget. And of course, we took our orders for them.
Right.
And I had men that were with him every place he went. And he had his own helicopter, and of course, he had his battalions out there maneuvering. In his brigade, he had 3 battalions. And in most battalions, there were 4 infantry companies.
Right, right.
So he was quite an individual, and I hated to see him have to move on, but he was promoted to general, and in March, right after Operation White Wing Massacre.
Right.
And I've stayed in touch with his wife. I found him in 1994.
Right.
In fact, on November 11th, and went over and spoke with him. He had just had a stroke, and Mrs. Lynch and I started a relationship of talking. And in fact, I was just over to see her 2 weeks ago, and she's 94 years young.
Oh, and doing well.
And she and Julie Moore,
Right.
from the movie We Were Soldiers,
Right.
they were very, very close friends
Right.
at Fort Benning while we were all over in Vietnam.
I want to talk about that now. I want to move on to you also served, when you were attached to the 3rd Brigade, you served under Colonel Hal Moore, who also became a general. And for those people who saw the movie or read the book was called We Were Soldiers and Young Ones. And the movie We Were Soldiers that Mel Gibson, I believe, produced and starred in. You and I both agree it's probably the most accurate and the best movie involving Vietnam that's ever been made.
Very much so.
I definitely believe that. You were there at that time. You weren't directly involved in the Battle of Hai Drang, but you were there about 10 miles away in your duty as a military police, and you served under Hal Moore. Talk about that time, talk about what you remember about that time, and I also want you to talk about the movie also and the book and the effect that it had on you. And a little bit later we're going to see, as a matter of fact, a picture of a letter that you received not too long ago from Hal Moore in response to a letter that you wrote. Talk about all aspects of what we're talking about there.
Well, of course, the Pleiku campaign, or the Battle of Hai Drang, basically started towards the end of October, and then went into November. And the 1st and 2nd of the 7th Cav, and Colonel Moore was, Lieutenant Colonel Moore at that time commanded the 1st of the 7th. And they were the ones that really stepped into that battle, as the movie depicts. And better individuals than I, those that served, they had a history versus fiction. And they had 2 of the Medal of Honor winners on that, and plus 2 or 3 of the NCOs, and they indicated that movie was 70 to 80% accurate. And so from my standpoint, what I saw, when our unit came up to relieve the 3rd Brigade, which was only 2 battalions, and at that point, the 2nd of the 7th Cav, in the second part of that battle, had really lost a lot of people. And I think there was over 350 men that were killed in those 2 battles.
Right.
Colonel Moore's unit lost about 80. But to see the equipment, the blood-stained equipment that was stacked up, and the weapons, was a sight that it's just amazing.
Right.
And what they went through during that time. And I can just assure you that as a military police unit, we handled those individuals that got in trouble with those units with a lot of respect and pride. And we did this with all the 1st Cav.
Right.
We took care of our own. And many times if they got in trouble, we just took them to their first sergeants and let them take care of it.
Right.
But that was a major battle, and of course right after that, we refitted a lot of the units that were in that battle. We brought in a whole new group of men came in that had volunteered to go into the Army. They were regular Army. They heard the call of the President of the country, and we got this new group of influx in December of '65 and January of '66. While a lot of the guys were leaving, about 2/3 of our company rotated home. And so we had to train them up. Then we stepped into the battle, or the Operation White Wing Master, which was the longest operation of the war. And it went for about 45 days.
Indeed. I want to go ahead and move on to some photographs that you supplied for us, some photographs from your time at Vietnam, and I want you to look at them and sort of show us what we're looking at. I think the first one up, as a matter of fact, is that's your emblem, that's your patch. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that emblem is the 1st Cav patch with a horse, and it was. You see that on many of our present veterans that are in Iraq. That unit is based at Fort hood. It's a heavy tank unit now, or armor unit, and it's one that we wear with pride on our right shoulders.
So that's the 545th. Is that right?
That is the patch for the entire division.
Entire division. Okay. There you are. There's young Al Rampmeier right there. Where was that taken? And talk about that.
That was taken on the coast of Vietnam, about 20 miles from Quy Nhon, going towards what's called Bong Song. We are in a brigade area. I'm carrying, I have a AK-47, which is a weapon that I carried for a while due to only having a 45 caliber pistol, and so I was able to get one of those, and I carried that for quite a while.
Okay, let's move on. You're on the left. What are we doing here?
That's my platoon sergeant, who was a veteran of Korea, and I was blessed to have strong NCOs, non-commissioned officers, to serve with. And Sergeant Kernan just passed away a year and a half ago. He was living in Hillsboro, Texas, but he was actually from Georgia. And he always said, "Sir, I'll take care of the men. You take care of the officers and the brigade, and when I need you, I'll call you."
All right.
We're playing with knives there.
Yeah, it looks like you are. What's this? I think is that you on the left in that picture?
That's me on the left. That's a Texas boy by the name of Lot, who helped barbecue a calf. We had helped a Army of the Republic of Vietnam lieutenant that had a deserter, and he gave us a Jersey calf, and so we barbecued it. And we're up at near LZ Pony above Bong Song in the February '66 time frame, and we barbecued that for all of the men and everybody else that we barbecued a whole calf.
All right, let's go to the next picture.
This is also during the Operation White Wing Masher. Those are a lot of the individuals that were moved out of their homes, and we call them Viet Cong suspects. They were moved away so that they would not be involved in the firefights, and for protection purposes. They were interrogated by our military intelligence group, and we have them behind concertina wire. Most of those were released to the Army or Republic of Vietnam, and then of course then they returned either to their homes or they were sent to a area where they would not be involved in getting shot at again.
Okay.
This is up near Kontum. We're getting ready to fly into a Special Forces camp. That's me sitting in the middle. Just to my left is Sergeant Sanders. He and I have stayed in close contact. We usually talk at least once or twice a month. He lives in Phoeba, Mississippi, and he's medically retired due to Agent Orange. And that's a group of my men. We're actually getting ready to back a Jeep and a trailer into a Caribou.
Okay. Let's move on. This is quite a unique picture. This is General Westmoreland and Colonel Moore, right?
Yes. This is Colonel Hal Moore. This is July the 4th, 1966. He's receiving the Distinguished Service Cross from General Westmoreland. That's pretty special for something like that to happen. Of course, the division received the Presidential Unit Citation for the Play Coup campaign, but General Westmoreland was there. We're in a Special Forces camp called Dong Tre, and we're near Tuy Hoa, above Quy Nhon. And here he is getting ready to turn over his brigade and be sent home.
Right. All right.
This is two of the H-13 bubble helicopters that were coming in to get diesel fuel, and they hooked helicopter blades, and it took the top off one helicopter, and of course took the blades off both, and it was right there where our unit, we were within about 100 yards of it.
All right, let's move on to the next picture. This is a letter that we referred to. It was written to you in January of this year from Hal Moore in response to a letter that you wrote to him. And I know this letter means a lot to you. He lives in Auburn, Alabama. If you can't read what it says, first, thank you for your combat service in Vietnam as a fellow 1st Cav trooper and for the help that you and your men gave to me and my troopers in some very spooky places. And thank you for the photos of that sad occasion when I had to leave my great brigade at Dong Tre on 4 July 66 with respect to a fellow 1st Cav combat veteran signed Hal Moore, and that was written to you. So I know that letter means a lot to you.
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm. He was a brilliant tactician. They called him the killer of North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. He was a West Point graduate. Interesting thing is that he had an effect upon this gentleman in the picture here.
Right. That's and talk about that picture.
This is 4-star General Norman Schwarzkopf,
mm-hmm.
retired, and our company had a special reception for him for the veterans before he spoke to us in our International Leadership Conference.
Right.
And I was wearing my 1st Cav Stetson, and as soon as he saw it, he came over, and we started talking. It turns out that he knew, obviously, both of the 2 individuals that I served with, those 2 colonels, but Hal Moore was very special to him because in 1956, Hal Moore recommended that instead of going engineering, he would go infantry.
Right.
And of course, he said, "Here I am, a retired 4-star general."
Indeed. Indeed. Al, we're out of time, believe it or not, but I want to thank you for your service and thank you for being with us today. There's a whole lot more to talk about, the reunions that you have of the 545th and the great service that you give to our community now, but we're out of time, and I want to thank you for our service.
Thank you for
your
having
service. The Vietnam War is part of our history that will be debated as long as there are historians to debate it. But one thing can't be debated is the bravery and dedication of the young men and women who went there, those who returned, and those 58,000 Americans who did not. We thank Al Rampmeier for his service, as we do all veterans. I'm Tom Turbeville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.